Welcome to Podkey Daily News, your fast brief on markets, medicine, tech, and global pressure points. A personalized cancer vaccine just cleared a major late-stage hurdle. Bond markets are flashing fiscal stress again, and AI's growth story is running into both financial pressure and local political resistance. The biggest medical development is from Moderna and Merck, where a personalized mRNA melanoma vaccine showed late-stage results that beat Keytruda alone by reducing recurrence and metastasis. This vaccine is tailored to each patient's tumor mutations, and the companies say melanoma did not return in the trial population, receiving the combined approach. Why it matters is straightforward. This is the first successful late-stage test of a personalized mRNA cancer therapy, which gives the mRNA platform a serious proof point beyond COVID vaccines. Markets treated it that way. Moderna shares surged sharply on the news, with reported gains ranging from roughly doubling to well beyond that. The caution is that researchers still describe the findings as preliminary and real-world rollout is still ahead. Moderna says it hopes to seek approval next year, so the next thing to watch is how regulators judge durability, manufacturability, and whether this can scale beyond melanoma. In the US, public debt has now passed $40 trillion, and annual interest costs have topped $1 trillion. That is the core fiscal backdrop behind the latest bond market stress. Long-term Treasury yields have climbed hard, with the 30-year reaching a 19-year high. The Treasury has responded by at least doubling repurchases of long-dated securities to try to push those yields back down. That can help at the margin, but it does not solve the structural problem. Analysts point to persistent deficits, heavy long-term Treasury issuance, inflation risk, weak auction demand, geopolitical tensions, and even competition from corporate borrowing, including AI-related funding needs. The practical takeaway is that higher long-term yields raise borrowing costs across the economy and increase pressure on Washington to make actual choices on taxes, spending, and major programs like Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and veterans benefits. What to watch next is whether bond demand stabilizes or whether the market keeps forcing the issue faster than policymakers want. AI remains a growth story, but the financial picture is splitting. OpenAI's revenue growth slowed in the second quarter to 18% while losses widened, which disappointed investors. Anthropic, by contrast, reportedly more than doubled revenue to $11.6 billion and narrowed losses, giving it a stronger efficiency story and increasing competitive pressure on OpenAI. OpenAI is trying to convert mass consumer use into recurring enterprise revenue with new models, codex tools, and a broader ChatGPT super app push. Leadership changes, including replacing the chief revenue officer, underline how much pressure there is to justify massive data center spending. At the same time, AI infrastructure is hitting political resistance on the ground. Communities are pushing back on big data center projects over water use, environmental impact, taxes, infrastructure strain, and doubts about local job creation. Companies like OpenAI and Meta are responding with lobbying, public meetings, and community investment pledges, but approval is getting harder. The next phase of the AI race is not just model quality. It is whether these firms can secure the power, land, water, and political consent to keep scaling. Meta is under renewed pressure in court, where several U.S. states accuse the company of designing its platforms to addict teens and hiding the harms while harvesting user attention and data. The states are seeking design changes and substantial penalties, and they also allege unlawful data collection from users under 13. A former product safety employee, Arturo Bejar, testified that millions of Instagram users were under 13, that internal research showed elevated harms for young users, and that executives were aware of the risks. Meta says it has removed large amounts of bullying and harassment content, offers parental controls, and disputes the legal claims. Why this matters beyond Meta is that the case goes to platform design itself, not just isolated moderation failures. If the states gain traction, the pressure point shifts toward product architecture, age verification, and youth safety obligations across the industry. In one of the most closely watched Gaza accountability cases, Israel's military acknowledged firing on the car carrying 5-year-old Hind Rajab and her relatives, reversing its earlier denial. and opened a criminal investigation. It also said an ambulance sent to rescue her was shelled, killing 2 paramedics who had reportedly coordinated their movement beforehand. Human rights groups said the investigation matters, but they also warned that internal military probes have historically produced very few indictments in Gaza cases and rarely reach senior decision-makers. Alongside that, the scale of uncertainty around the dead and missing remains staggering. More than 5,000 people are estimated missing in Gaza, with families unsure whether relatives are buried under rubble, detained by Israel, or dead without recovery or confirmation. The Gaza Health Ministry has reported more than 70,000 deaths since the conflict began, but restricted access, bodies recovered late from debris, and contested detention records continue to complicate any full accounting. What matters here is not only the casualty count, it is the deepening problem of documentation, trust, and whether any mechanism can credibly establish responsibility. The climate signal to watch is El Niño. Current development is unusually strong for August and could approach the largest events in the modern record, with some local anomaly estimates reaching around 3 degrees Celsius. That points to a likely record-hot global year and wider disruption to rainfall and storm patterns. Effects already cited include heavy storms threatening Panama Canal water supply, drought across parts of Ethiopia, Kenya, and India, and a potential 15 million more people exposed to food shortages, according to the World Food Program. Climate change intensifies the damage by raising the baseline, so El Niño starts from a hotter and wetter atmosphere than it used to. There was one encouraging public health result out of the UK. A comparative study of about 1,500 children in London and 1,500 in Luton found that children's lung growth accelerated within 4 years after London's ultra-low emission zone cut pollution. Researchers called the recovery stunning. The practical point is that air quality policy can produce measurable gains in child health on a politically relevant timescale, not just over generations. 2 China stories are worth watching for what they say about industrial strategy. First, Chinese shipping is making greater use of Russia's Northern Sea route, which can cut Asia-Europe transit time from about 40 days to roughly 20 and materially reduce fuel costs. That could eventually lower delivered costs, especially for LNG, but the constraints are serious: seasonal ice, Russian icebreaker dependence, higher insurance, smaller vessel sizes, occasional hull damage, and a built-in geopolitical reliance on Moscow. Second, Chinese robotics firms like Unitree are pushing cheaper quadruped and humanoid robots into warehouses, hotels, and public spaces. Investor appetite has been strong, helped by China's fast manufacturing ecosystem and state support for embodied AI. The practical implication is that China is trying to move first from flashy demos to affordable deployment in dirty, dangerous, and repetitive work. The open question is how durable that lead is once deployment gets beyond controlled settings and into harder economics around labor and reliability. Those are the developments with the most practical weight today. Thanks for listening to Podkey Daily News. This episode was generated by Podkey. Create your own at podkey.fm.